They say miracles happen when we least expect them, and sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can set off a chain of extraordinary events. In a bustling city brimming with possibility and heartbreak lived a humble nurse named Keisha Jones. She was young, overworked, underpaid, and black in a system that often overlooked people like her. One cold night, she offered warmth and compassion to a man who appeared homeless outside Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan. Little did she know this simple gesture would ignite a whirlwind of secrets, betrayals, and hope, and lead to a grand proposal that would change her life forever. Keisha Jones was no stranger to hardship. Growing up in a cramped apartment in Brooklyn, she was raised by her grandmother, an immigrant from Jamaica, who instilled in her the values of hard work and empathy. Keisha would often watch her grandmother patch up her neighbors' cuts and bruises, anything from small scrapes to deeper wounds of the soul. Even with limited funds, her grandmother found ways to heal people with warmth, a kind word, or sometimes a simple bowl of soup. This was her introduction to caregiving, an unsung mission to make life a little better for others. Though resources were always tight, Keisha had big dreams. She longed to become a nurse, to stand in the halls of a prestigious hospital and save lives the way she watched her grandmother save spirits. So she studied hard, balancing 3 part-time jobs while in nursing school. She worked night shifts at a local grocery store, babysat on weekends, and cleaned houses every Wednesday morning to pay her tuition. There were days she considered giving up. Days when exhaustion weighed heavily on her, and her bank account barely had enough to pay for a single MetroCard ride. But her resolve never wavered. She had to make something of herself for her grandmother, for the community that had once helped raise her, and for the neighbors who believed in her capability to heal just like her grandmother did. When Keisha finally donned her nurse's scrubs, proudly embroidered with the logo of Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan, it felt like stepping into a new life. The reality, however, was far from glamorous. The hours were brutal. The pay wasn't half as much as she hoped, and every day she encountered challenges she had never anticipated. On a typical day in the hospital, she would race from one patient's room to another, administering medications, checking vitals, delivering encouraging smiles, and listening to the anxieties of people in their most vulnerable moments. She saw it all: the heartbreak of losing loved ones, the triumph of successful surgeries, the messy arguments between family members forced into close quarters by illness. Yet despite the emotional roller coaster, she found meaning in each day. She was there for the patients who felt alone, and that small difference fueled her heart. Her colleagues were a mixture of supportive mentors and indifferent bureaucrats. Some doctors, especially the older ones, scarcely acknowledged her presence. A few co-nurses made underhanded remarks about her background, her accent inherited from her grandmother's Jamaican lilt, and her inexperience. Yet there were also shining examples of the profession's noblest virtues: a head nurse named Mrs. Albright, who praised Keisha's compassion, a fellow nurse named Maricel, who cooked Filipino dishes to share with her late at night, and a jovial surgeon who never failed to thank the staff after each operation. In her free time, what little she had, Keisha volunteered at a local community center in Brooklyn, hoping to pass on the generosity and kindness she'd received as a child. Her grandmother had once told her, "No matter what you have in your pockets, you can always afford to give a little of your heart." Keisha tried to keep that lesson alive. She led free blood pressure screenings and taught the elderly how to manage their medications. She liked to believe she made a small difference, one conversation at a time. Unbeknownst to her destiny, was already weaving threads for a story that would reach beyond the hospital corridors and into her personal life. A fleeting encounter with a man who seemed to have lost everything would soon test her resolve, challenge her compassion, and ultimately transform her future. For now, her world was the hospital, the patients who needed her, and the faint echo of her grandmother's voice reminding her to keep going. And so she did, without any idea that her greatest challenge and greatest reward would emerge together from the most unlikely place. One frigid November night, Keisha's shift ended at 11 p.m. Exhaustion tugged at her body, but she had promised her neighbor she would drop by their apartment in Brooklyn to check on an elderly relative just returning from surgery. Rather than take a taxi, an expensive luxury she could not afford, she left through the back entrance of Mount Sinai to catch the subway. The cold wind sliced through her thin jacket, and she huddled in the shadowed doorway for a moment. That was when she saw him. A man, his face obscured by the hood of a battered coat, lay curled against a wall, a piece of cardboard with the scribbled words, "Homeless." Please Help sat propped in front of him. His shoes were tattered and his hair peeked out in unkempt clumps. People passed him by without a second glance. In the swirl of Manhattan's busy pace, the man was invisible. Keisha felt her heart tighten. She had grown accustomed to encountering homelessness in the city, but something in his posture, his quiet dignity, cut through the chaos of her mind. She saw how he kept his head bowed, as though ashamed to look anyone in the eye. Keisha dug into her bag, only to find a $5 bill and a few coins. Her first instinct was to hand him the money, but something made her pause. She crouched near him and spoke softly. "Sir, are you all right?" He flinched, startled by her approach. Slowly, he lifted his head to reveal a pair of intelligent green eyes. For a moment, Keisha felt a strange flash of recognition, but it vanished as quickly as it came. Up close, she saw that he had a faint bruise on his cheek. I'm fine," he mumbled, but his voice trembled from the cold. "Are you hungry?" she asked gently. "I have a few dollars, but I can also bring you something warm from the hospital cafeteria." He looked away as though embarrassed. I can't afford—" "Thank you, but you don't have to." Keisha smiled gently, even though her breath was visible in the icy air. "I insist. Wait here, and I'll be right back." And so instead of hurrying to her subway, she took a detour inside the hospital. She spent her last few dollars on a cup of steaming soup, a roll of bread, and a small bottle of water. Nurses were technically allowed discounted rates, and she used that perk to stretch her money as best she could. Then she headed back outside, her heart beating a bit faster than usual. When she returned, the man was still there, hugging himself to stave off the chill. She handed him the soup and bread. He accepted them with a look of gratitude that made her smile. "Thank you," he said, his voice soft but sincere. She noticed his accent was polished, each syllable carefully articulated, unusual for someone who'd been on the streets for a while. But she brushed the thought aside. "I'm Keisha," she introduced, not expecting him to share his own name in return. Homeless men and women she'd encountered often preferred anonymity. He hesitated for a long moment, then said, "Thank you, Keisha." "My name is Tristan." Tristan. She rolled the name around in her head, wondering if there was any significance. "Well, Tristan, I'm a nurse, but if you ever need something, a bandage, a checkup, or just someone to talk to, let me know. I'll try to help." He nodded. Something flickered in his eyes, a sadness she couldn't quite place. It's more than I deserve." For a moment, the city noise faded as they locked eyes, exchanging an unspoken understanding that life was unkind, but that kindness could still exist in the unlikeliest corners. She wondered who he was, where he had come from and how he had ended up here. Yet she didn't pry. It was enough for now to share a warm meal and a compassionate moment. Finally, she stood up, adjusting her coat. "I need to catch the subway before it gets too late," she said. "You stay safe, all right?" He nodded, cupping the warm soup in trembling hands. As she left him there, Keisha felt an odd mixture of relief and concern. She'd done what she could for the moment, but she couldn't shake the feeling that their paths would cross again. Little did she know that Tristan, far from being a destitute stranger, was a man draped in secrets, poised to reappear in ways she could never imagine. The chill she felt was not just from the wind. Something was shifting in her life, and destiny had quietly set its gears in motion. Winter in Manhattan descended with fierce determination, bringing icy winds, grey skies, and a flurry of patients through the doors of Mount Sinai Hospital. Cases of pneumonia, frostbite, and complications from the common cold surged, and the already short-staffed nursing team found themselves overwhelmed. Keisha's hours were relentless. Some weeks, she would pull 3 overnight shifts in a row, catching only a few hours of sleep in the staff room, before tackling an afternoon shift. Despite the strain, she managed to maintain her empathy for each patient who needed her care. Behind-the-scenes hospital politics made life more complicated than any stethoscope reading or IV insertion. Dr. Alan Rhodes, a young and ambitious resident, routinely clashed with more experienced nurses. He treated them like subordinates whose medical opinions were inferior. One day, Keisha dared to question a prescription he wrote for an elderly patient with a known allergy. Dr. Rhodes glared at her, practically hissing his words. "You think you know more than me, Nurse Jones. Stick to your tasks and let the real doctors handle the decisions." The sting of his dismissal bore into her. She recalled all those hours of study, the expertise she'd built in patient care, and the oath she silently took to do no harm. But Dr. Rhodes's arrogance threatened her confidence. Still, she couldn't let him endanger a patient. She promptly reported the mistake to the head nurse, Mrs. Albright, who resolved the situation quietly. Though Keisha did the right thing, Dr. Rhodes's resentment toward her grew an invisible wall erected between them. He scowled every time she so much as entered the same hallway. Meanwhile, hospital gossip circulated about a wealthy potential donor rumored to be touring the facility soon. Whispers said it was someone from a prominent financial family in Manhattan. The staff was on edge, worried that any slip-up might cost the hospital a massive grant or donation. Keisha mostly ignored the chatter, too busy administering medication and comforting frightened patients to pay attention. Still, in fleeting moments, she wondered what it would be like to have money. Real money. Enough to pay off student loans, to move out of her tiny, infested apartment, and maybe even buy her grandmother a little home of her own. The thought made her smile, but she quickly returned to the tasks at hand. During this hectic period, Keisha found herself thinking about the homeless man she'd encountered Tristan. She wondered whether he'd found shelter from the cold. She would occasionally look for him near the back entrance or the streets around Mount Sinai, but never caught sight of him again. Perhaps he'd moved on to a different corner or found a temporary bed in a shelter. Part of her was relieved. Another part worried that he might be in worse shape. Amid the chaos, Keisha faced personal challenges as well. Her grandmother's health was declining. After all these years of caring for everyone else, the older woman was now in need of care herself. Keisha spent every spare hour traveling back to Brooklyn to check on her. She made sure there was enough food in the fridge, that her grandmother's blood pressure medication was taken on time, and that she wasn't lonely. But with each visit, she noticed how her grandmother moved more slowly, how her once lively eyes seemed dimmer. She knew time was precious. The stress piled on. Lack of sleep, long hours, constant demands, yet Keisha refused to back down. She reminded herself of the promise she made to help others the way her grandmother had taught her. Even if the world around her seemed indifferent, she was determined to keep her heart open. She had seen too many patients left alone, too many souls who felt the hospital was just another cold institution. Little did she know that outside those hospital walls, the man she had helped Tristan was weaving through circumstances that would soon thrust him right back into her path. And when he reappeared, it would be under circumstances that would shock not just her, but everyone around her. Fate, it seemed, was not finished with them. The trials within those hospital corridors were only the beginning. On a snowy evening, Keisha was finishing her shift when she noticed a young mother quietly crying in a corner of the waiting room. She clutched a toddler in her lap, a child wrapped in a thin coat. Her cheeks flushed from the cold. The mother's eyes were hollow with worry, tears smudging her mascara into dark circles. Keisha approached gently, her voice calm but concerned. "Ma'am, can I help you with something?" The woman sniffled, nodding slowly. "My daughter. She has a fever. I don't have insurance. I'm worried they won't even see her here." Mount Sinai did see emergency cases regardless of insurance, but bureaucratic hurdles often complicated matters. Keisha placed a comforting hand on the woman's shoulder. "Let me get her vitals and I'll see what we can do." "All right." She led them to a quieter area and began a basic assessment. The little girl stared at Keisha with wide eyes, curious and fearful. Keisha flashed her a gentle smile. "It's all right, sweetie. I'm here to help." After taking the toddler's temperature, a concerning 102 degrees, Keisha arranged for a quick checkup with the on-call pediatrician, circumventing the red tape as best as she could. She knew this could get her in trouble if certain administrators found out, but she also knew ignoring the child's fever could lead to severe complications. Compassion guided her just as her grandmother would have done. The mother's relief was palpable. She squeezed Keisha's hand, sobbing quietly. "I don't know how to thank you. We've been turned away from 2 clinics already." Keisha only smiled. "This is what I'm here for." Later that night, as Keisha left the hospital, she saw the mother and child in the waiting area. The toddler now sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms, the fever safely managed. The gratitude in the woman's eyes was all the thanks Keisha needed. She felt a warm sensation in her chest, a reminder of why she had chosen this path despite all the challenges. Outside, the snowfall had intensified. Icicles hung from the streetlights and the sidewalks were slippery. Keisha pulled her coat tighter around her, recalling her last conversation with Tristan, the homeless man. She scanned the street out of habit, searching for a sign of him in the swirling flakes. She spotted a figure near the corner and felt a jolt of hope. But as she approached, she realized it was just another homeless individual, a young man with a scraggly beard wearing mismatched boots. Still, she reached into her coat pocket and handed him $1, wishing she could do more. "Bless you, sister," the man muttered, and Keisha nodded, her heart heavy. The city seemed filled with sorrow at times, with so many people cast aside. She made her way to the subway, each step leaving footprints in the fresh snow. All the while, her mind wandered to Tristan. Perhaps he had found a shelter, or maybe he had moved to another part of town. She wondered what had driven him to the streets, and 100 other questions that had no answers. That night, Keisha dreamt of her grandmother's small house in Jamaica, a place she had never actually seen in person, but had only heard of in stories. In the dream, she was walking along a dirt path, surrounded by lush banana trees and coconut palms. She felt a sense of belonging and peace. Suddenly, Tristan appeared at the edge of the path, but his clothes were different. He was dressed in a fine suit, hair neatly combed, a haunted look in his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. She extended her hand, and at that moment, the scene dissolved into swirling lights. Keisha jolted awake with her heart pounding. She couldn't shake the image of Tristan in a suit looking so unlike the disheveled man she'd seen curled up on the sidewalk. Brushing off the dream as a random manifestation of her day's concerns, she got ready for yet another shift, her mind still lingering on the question, who really was Tristan? What she could not have known was that Tristan's life was far more complex than she had any reason to guess, and her compassion, which extended beyond the duties of her job, was the key that would eventually unlock doors she never even knew existed. Days turned to weeks, and the blizzards only grew fiercer. Stress weighed down on Keisha. The hospital was short-staffed, her grandmother's health was deteriorating, and she was late on her rent for the second month in a row. The landlord, a curt woman named Mrs. Weinstein, had threatened eviction if the overdue balance wasn't settled soon. Every time Keisha closed her eyes, she saw bills piling up her grandmother's frail face and the endless corridors of the hospital. As though her woes weren't enough, Dr. Rhodes's antagonism escalated. He singled her out during rounds, questioned her competence in front of patients, and even complained to the administration that she was overstepping her boundaries by making medical suggestions. Keisha tried her best to remain composed, to focus on the needs of her patients, but each confrontation left her feeling more anxious. One particularly grueling day, after a 12-hour shift, Keisha stopped by her grandmother's apartment. She found the old woman wheezing, her eyes distant. Panic clutched Keisha's heart as she rushed to check her grandmother's blood pressure, dangerously high. Without hesitation, she called an ambulance. Her grandmother was admitted to Mount Sinai, ironically, under the same roof where Keisha spent most of her waking hours caring for strangers. Keisha was torn between her duty as a nurse and her duty as a granddaughter. After completing her shift, she would rush to her grandmother's bedside, staying as long as she could. The doctors discovered complications in her grandmother's kidneys and a potential need for dialysis. Medical bills loomed over Keisha's head, and she felt her financial burdens multiply. The swirl of emotions threatened to drown her, but she held on, determined not to let her grandmother feel alone. In the midst of these hardships, Keisha clung to small moments of hope. Mrs. Albright, the head nurse, quietly rearranged schedules so Keisha could spend more time with her grandmother. Maricel, her Filipino colleague, offered home-cooked meals, while a few patients expressed heartfelt gratitude for Keisha's kindness. Though the world seemed to be pressing down on her, these acts of support reminded her that she wasn't entirely alone. Still, the heartbreaks kept piling on. One evening, as she was leaving the hospital after visiting her grandmother, she noticed security guards gathered near the emergency entrance. Curiosity piqued. She approached cautiously, recognizing a figure lying on a gurney. Her heart skipped a beat. She thought it might be Tristan. But when she got closer, she saw it was someone else, entirely the same homeless man she had given $1 to weeks earlier. He was unconscious, likely suffering from hypothermia. Paramedics were frantically trying to stabilize him. Keisha felt tears sting her eyes. She thought of all the homeless individuals out in the freezing streets. She thought of Tristan wherever he was, and prayed he had found some warmth, some safety. That moment hammered home the fragility of life, how easily someone could slip through the cracks if no one extended a helping hand. Later that night, she returned to her shabby apartment, rummaging through her nearly empty fridge to find something to eat. A single leftover sandwich and a half-gallon of milk past its sell-by date. With a sigh, she settled for a glass of water. She wondered how long she could keep going like this, juggling rent, her grandmother's health-hostile colleagues, and the emotional weight of her patient's suffering. Slumping on her worn-out couch, Keisha thought back to her grandmother's words. "Have faith, child, and the Lord will provide a way." It was a comforting thought, yet Keisha couldn't shake off the creeping despair. She closed her eyes, letting the silence of her apartment envelop her. Tears slipped down her cheeks unbidden. She whispered a prayer, a plea for strength, for a miracle, for something to finally break the cycle of hardship. Little did she know, the wheels of fate were turning swiftly, and her life was on the verge of a dramatic twist. In the darkest hour, sometimes a glimmer of light emerges unexpectedly. And unbeknownst to Keisha, that glimmer was closer than she could imagine. Tristan, the mysterious man she had shown kindness to, was about to step back into her life in a most unimaginable way. Snowdrifts lined the sidewalks like frosted dunes, and New York City was in a deep freeze. The hospital administration buzzed with anticipation the rumored wealthy donor had finally confirmed a visit. Word spread that he was part of the Hemsley family, a family name synonymous with upscale real estate finance and philanthropic endeavors across Manhattan. The staff was busy polishing the corridors, ensuring everything looked impeccable for his arrival. Keisha paid little attention to the fuss. She had more pressing matters. Her grandmother's kidney complications had worsened, and the doctors recommended immediate dialysis. If that wasn't stressful enough, Dr. Rhodes continued his insufferable crusade to paint her as incompetent. Nevertheless, Keisha found solace in each patient she cared for, reminding herself that her reason for being a nurse transcended hospital politics. The day of the donor's visit arrived. The air crackled with energy as administrators, doctors, and a few select nurses waited in the lobby. Keisha was part of the group only by chance. Mrs. Albright had asked her to drop off some charts. She stood at the back, trying her best to look inconspicuous. Outside, luxury SUVs pulled up, and a man wearing a tailored coat emerged, surrounded by a small entourage. At first, Keisha barely glanced at the arriving party. Rich donors were a world apart from her own reality. But then she heard a familiar voice, and her eyes snapped to the front of the group. Her heart nearly stopped. Standing there, looking nothing like the disheveled homeless man she remembered, was Tristan. But now he was dressed in an expensive suit, a fine wool coat draped over his broad shoulders, his once unkempt hair styled neatly. And by his side, an older gentleman with silver hair and a sharp gaze held an air of authority. Keisha's mind whirled, disbelief pounding in her veins. The man she'd given soup to the man who had been sleeping on a piece of cardboard was not just a random homeless stranger. He was part of the Hemsley family's philanthropic circle. Potentially the donor himself, Mrs. Albright, and Dr. Rhodes led the group on a tour of the facility, their voices animated with excitement. Tristan, if that was indeed his real name, listened politely, occasionally asking a question in a low, confident tone. Keisha locked eyes with him once. She saw a flicker of recognition, an almost imperceptible tension. Her heart thundered so loudly that she thought others might hear it. She slipped away, unable to handle the confusion that churned in her stomach. She found refuge in the staff lounge, leaning against a wall, breathing heavily. Had he been playing some sort of cruel game, testing the sincerity of strangers? Why had he hidden his identity as a wealthy man? Her mind darted to the memory of him, huddled in the cold, the sincerity in his eyes when he thanked her for the soup. That hadn't seemed like an act. So what was going on? She didn't have much time to wonder. Moments later, the lounge door opened, and in walked Tristan alone. He held himself with grace, his eyes reflecting a mixture of guilt and relief. Keisha, he spoke softly. The simple act of saying her name carried an unusual gravity. He seemed less like a refined businessman now, and more like the vulnerable individual she had encountered on the streets. She stared at him, 100 questions on her tongue. But she managed only one. Tristan, who are you? His shoulders tensed. He took a measured breath. My full name is Tristan Hemsley. My father is Charles Hemsley, a real estate investor and philanthropist. I'm sorry about the deception. Keisha's heart pounded. She wanted to shout to demand answers, but she kept her voice steady. Why? Why were you on the street? Why let me think you were homeless? A rueful look crossed his face. It's complicated. I've been traveling for months trying to understand the city's issues. First-hand homelessness, poverty, the healthcare system. My father's philanthropic team wanted me to experience life at the ground level before deciding where to direct funds. But I took it further. I wanted the raw truth, not just guided tours. So I lived on the streets, tested shelters, talked to people. I didn't expect anyone to offer kindness without judgment. And then I met you. Keisha folded her arms, her anger wrestling with her empathy. You could have frozen to death. That's not a social experiment. That's reckless. A gentle sorrow touched his features. It was reckless, but I had to see for myself. And the night we met, I truly needed help. I was robbed, attacked. I got separated from my group and I had no wallet, no phone. You saved me, Keisha, in more ways than one. Silence stretched between them. Keisha's heart felt torn. Part of her was hurt. Part of her was deeply moved. No one had ever told her she saved them. Finally, she asked, So why are you here now? Because my father's philanthropic foundation is considering a major donation to Mount Sinai, Tristan replied. I'm here to evaluate the place, but I also came hoping to find you. Me, she echoed, voice trembling slightly. He managed a tentative smile. I haven't been able to forget it, you. The way you treated me that night. I wanted to repay your kindness somehow, and I wanted to see if maybe we could talk. Or just then the lounge door opened again, revealing Dr. Rhodes, who looked startled to see them talking. His eyes darted between Keisha and Tristan, suspicion etched across his face. Keisha quickly averted her gaze, and Tristan's expression shifted to a more formal mask, an unsettling reminder of the worlds that divided them. 1,000 emotions raged in Keisha's chest as she slipped away, leaving Tristan alone with Dr. Rhodes. She felt both a strange hope blossoming in her heart and an undercurrent of dread. For someone like Tristan Hemsley, the line between sincerity and privilege could blur, yet the look in his eyes when he thanked her was etched in her memory. All she knew was that nothing would be the same from this moment on. The mysterious man had unveiled himself, and Keisha's life was about to take a drastic turn. The day after Tristan's reveal felt like a fever dream. Hospital staff buzzed with excitement. The Hemsley Foundation had expressed a keen interest in making a sizable donation. Rumors circulated that Tristan Hemsley himself found the hospital's work inspiring, though no one seemed to know the details. Keisha tried to go about her normal routine, but she was acutely aware of the sudden attention. A few colleagues, noticing Tristan's earlier conversation with her, threw suspicious glances her way. Doctor, Rhodes in particular seemed determined to capitalize on the potential donation. He took every opportunity to chat with the administrative staff, and even attempted to flatter Tristan when they crossed paths. He boasted about his accomplishments in patient care, never once mentioning the nurses who worked tirelessly beside him. The entire display made Keisha's stomach churn. One afternoon, Keisha visited her grandmother's room during a brief lull. The old woman lay resting, her breath labored from dialysis. Keisha gently took her grandmother's hand, noticing how papery and thin her skin had become. Keisha, her grandmother, whispered, "You look worried?" Keisha forced a small smile. "I'm just tired, Grandma. Work is hectic." Her grandmother's eyes held a knowing gleam. "It's more than that, child. Your eyes, they hold a sadness. You must talk to me." Keisha sighed, contemplating how much to reveal. "I met someone, but the situation is complicated. He's rich, Grandma. Like, unbelievably rich. And I'm just—" She trailed off, biting her lip. "You're just what a hard-working nurse with a kind heart." "Don't ever say just child," her grandmother scolded gently, her voice hoarse. "If he's a good man, it will show in his actions." Before Keisha could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Albright. "Please come to the admin office immediately. Urgent." Keisha felt her heart jolt. She rose, kissed her grandmother's forehead, and hurried out, anxiety gripping her. In the administrative office, she found Mrs. Albright, Dr. Rhodes, and 2 senior administrators waiting. Dr. Rhodes looked smug, arms folded. Mrs. Albright shot Keisha a sympathetic glance. Nurse Jones, one of the administrators, began sternly, "We have received a complaint regarding your conduct." Keisha's eyes flew to Dr. Rhodes. He kept his gaze level, but the corners of his mouth twitched in satisfaction. She swallowed hard. "A complaint?" "Yes," the administrator continued, flipping through papers. "Apparently you have been making unauthorized medical decisions and interfering with doctor's orders." "That's not true," Keisha replied, her voice trembling. She recounted the incident with Dr. Rhodes, where she'd pointed out a patient's allergy. "I was protecting the patient and a Mrs." Albright nodded, confirming Keisha's account, but the administrator sighed. "Be that as it may, Dr. Rhodes claims you questioned his authority multiple times. We also have reports that you diverted hospital resources, like offering free supplies and medications to patients without proper billing." Keisha's cheeks burned. Yes, she had occasionally bent rules to help uninsured patients or homeless individuals. She did it out of compassion, but now it seemed to be backfiring. "I only helped where help was needed," she whispered. Dr. Rhodes gave her a condescending look. "This is a hospital, Nurse Jones, not your personal charity." Mrs. Albright tried to defend her. Keisha's actions have always been in the best interest of the patients. She's one of the most compassionate nurses we have. The administrators exchanged glances. "Compassion or not, we must maintain procedure. For now, we're issuing a formal warning and placing you under review. Any further infractions could lead to dismissal." A heavy silence filled the room. Keisha felt tears prick her eyes. If she lost this job, she'd lose her apartment, her grandmother's chance at quality care, everything. Dr. Rhodes's triumphant stare turned her stomach. She wanted to protest, but fear and despair swallowed her words. She nodded stiffly and left the office. She found a deserted hallway to collect herself, pressing her trembling hands against her mouth to stifle sobs. She had sacrificed so much for this career. How could doing the right thing lead to such consequences? Suddenly, Tristan's voice called out, "Keisha!" She turned to see him approaching. Concern etched his face. "Are you all right?" She shook her head, tears threatening to spill over. "No, I'm not all right. I was just reprimanded for trying to help people." Tristan's jaw tightened. "I heard about some conflict. Look if it's about funding my father and I." But Keisha cut him off, a flood of pent-up frustration unleashing. "No, I don't need you to throw money at the problem, Tristan. Her voice wavered. "I just want to do my job to help people the way I've been taught. But apparently that's unacceptable if it doesn't align with bureaucratic procedures or a certain doctor's ego." He moved closer gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I never wanted this to happen. The donation we're considering, it's supposed to help not make things worse." Keisha sighed, blinking back tears. "I know. It's not your fault. It's all coming down at once. My grandmother is ill. My job is on the line. And I can't even process what I feel about you, the fact that you were living on the streets one day and wearing a $1,000 suit the next." Tristan looked pained. "I understand if you're angry." She closed her eyes briefly, summoning courage. "I'm not angry at you for having money. I'm angry at the hypocrisy of this place, where we claim to save lives but punish those who try to help in ways that don't follow protocol. It's not fair." At that, Tristan's gaze hardened with resolve. "I agree. Let me talk to my father and the board. Maybe we can address some of these internal issues." Keisha felt a swell of gratitude mixed with caution. Was this truly a turning point? A chance to bring justice, or would it cause more backlash? She exhaled slowly. "Thank you, Tristan. Whatever happens, just be careful. There are people here who won't like change, especially if it threatens their power." He nodded, looking more determined than ever. Keisha didn't realize it then, but this moment marked the beginning of a ripple effect. Tristan's involvement would spark confrontations within the hospital. And as for Dr. Rhodes, his betrayal was only the tip of the iceberg. Karma, however, had a way of circling back. And in a place as politically charged as Mount Sinai, the winds of retribution could blow swiftly and unexpectedly. With the threat of disciplinary action hanging over her, Keisha found her days at the hospital fraught with anxiety. Even the slightest misstep could result in her dismissal. She tiptoed through her shifts, ensuring every chart was flawlessly updated, every procedure strictly followed. It felt suffocating, reducing her once nurturing approach to a cold adherence to rules. Meanwhile, Tristan threw himself into investigating the administrative structure of Mount Sinai and the underfunded departments most in need of help. He spent hours meeting with different team leads, hospital accountants, and even a few patients to get a well-rounded picture. Keisha occasionally caught glimpses of him in the corridors, always flanked by staff eager to impress the potential donor. Despite their busy schedules, Tristan and Keisha began exchanging text messages at odd hours. A quick check-in. Here. A supportive note. There. Neither explicitly acknowledged the emotional tension growing between them, but there was an unspoken understanding that they were drawn to each other. One evening, while Keisha was monitoring a patient post-surgery, she received a text from Tristan. "Meet me at the hospital cafe at 8 p.m. if you can. I have news." Her heart fluttered, but the rational part of her mind warned her to remain cautious, especially at work. At 8 p.m., she made her way to the modest hospital cafe, a place with vending machines, a coffee counter, and a few tables scattered around. Tristan was already there, sipping tea. He looked tired but resolute. He gestured for her to join him at a corner table, away from prying eyes. "I spoke with my father," he began in a low voice. "We're considering a significant donation, but only if we can establish certain new protocols and oversight committees. I want to funnel funds directly to patient care, not just bureaucratic expansions." Keisha's eyes widened. "That sounds amazing. But can you really negotiate those conditions?" Tristan nodded. "My father respects my judgment, especially since I've taken the time to live among the people who need this kind of help. He's seen how serious I am about putting resources where they matter." A glimmer of hope flickered in Keisha's chest. If Tristan's plan succeeded, it could alleviate so many of the hospital's problems: understaffing, lack of resources for uninsured patients, and perhaps some measure of job security for nurses like her who championed compassionate care. This could change everything, she whispered. He reached across the table and gently covered her hand with his. "I hope so. And I wanted you to know. You were the reason I realized how vital frontline caregivers are. I never told you, but the soup you brought me that night felt like more than just a meal. It was like a lifeline, proof that kindness still exists." Keisha felt warmth spread across her cheeks. She tried to smile, but tears pricked her eyes. Memories of that night flooding back. "All I did was bring you soup." "You did more than that," Tristan said softly. "You saw me when no one else would." They held each other's gaze for a moment, the hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant beeping of hospital machines fading into the background. Keisha's heart thrummed, caught between gratitude and an emotion that felt suspiciously like love. Before they could say more, the door to the cafe swung open and Dr. Rhodes entered. His eyes zeroed in on them. A scowl darkened his features, but he quickly replaced it with a tight smile as he approached. "Mr. Hemsley," he said, "I've been looking for you. We have an important meeting with the board to finalize the donation details." Tristan kept his hand on Keisha's for a moment longer before pulling away and standing up. "Of course," he replied, his polite tone masking his irritation. "Let's go." Keisha gave them a small nod, looking away to hide her discomfort as Dr. Rhodes passed by her chair. He muttered, "You think you're clever, worming your way into the donor's good graces. But you'll slip up again, and when you do, I'll make sure you're out of here." The sting of his words brought back all her fears. She watched Tristan and Dr. Rhodes leave her mind racing with conflicting emotions: fear of losing her job, hope for the future of the hospital, and the budding affection she felt for Tristan. Still, for the first time in a long while, she felt a genuine sense of optimism. Maybe things were finally looking up. Maybe in the midst of all these challenges, a ray of hope had found its way into her life. But storms often gather just when the clouds begin to clear, and Keisha had yet to face the most startling twist of all. For while Tristan's proposed changes promised a better system, they also threatened those who thrived on the status quo, and not everyone would welcome such a transformation with open arms. The day of the official press conference arrived, a glitzy event where Tristan and his father, Charles Hemsley, would announce the Hemsley Foundation's donation to Mount Sinai. The hospital's lobby had been temporarily transformed into a stage complete with a podium, banners, and rows of seating. Local media outlets arrived, cameras rolling as eager staff members and reporters waited to hear the details. Keisha stood at the back of the crowd, her nerves wound tight. This announcement could mean everything for her patients. She only wished her grandmother could witness it in better health. The dialysis treatments had left her weak, but at least she was stable for the moment. On the makeshift stage, Charles Hemsley stepped up to the microphone, flanked by Tristan and the hospital board. He was an imposing figure, tall, silver-haired, and carrying himself with the confidence of a man who had navigated global business deals. In a measured tone, he spoke about the Hemsley Foundation's mission to bridge healthcare gaps, support underserved communities, and ensure that frontline professionals, like nurses, were empowered rather than stifled. Tristan, standing by his father's side, caught Keisha's eye from across the lobby. She offered a small, encouraging smile. When Charles concluded his speech, Tristan took the podium. He glanced at the gathered crowd, then spoke with a passion that resonated beyond the script. We intend to direct a significant portion of these funds toward immediate patient care, expanding free clinics within the hospital for uninsured individuals, increasing nurse-to-patient ratios, and improving staff training. Our goal is simple: to ensure that the people who need help the most receive it without bureaucracy getting in the way. Applause echoed through the lobby. Keisha felt tears prick her eyes. This was it, tangible change that might relieve so much suffering. She noticed Dr. Rhodes standing off to the side, looking less than thrilled. The resentment etched on his face gave her a chill, but she pushed aside the uneasy feeling, focusing on the positivity of the moment. As reporters threw out questions, Tristan and Charles fielded them gracefully. Cameras flashed. Hospital administrators seemed elated. When the conference ended, Tristan stepped away from the stage, weaving through the crowd. Before Keisha knew it, he was in front of her, smiling. "You did it," she murmured, her gratitude shining in her eyes. "We did it," he corrected gently. "You were the reason I understood the needs here." She blushed, looking down at her shoes. Before she could respond, Charles Hemsley joined them. His gaze moved from Keisha to Tristan, a curious twinkle in his eye. "So this is the young nurse you've told me about, Tristan." Tristan's cheeks colored slightly. "Yes, Father. This is Keisha Jones." Charles extended a hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Ms. Jones. Tristan speaks very highly of your dedication and compassion." She shook his hand, acutely aware of how surreal this all felt. "Thank you, Mr. Hemsley. Your donation will save countless lives." He nodded, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "That's what we're here for. But also Tristan tells me you're the person who inspired him to see beyond mere statistics and annual reports." Keisha's eyes flicked to Tristan, who offered a warm smile. Her heart fluttered. This moment felt too good to be true. She took a breath, about to thank them again, when she noticed Dr. Rhodes lurking a few steps away, listening in with a cold, calculating stare. "Excuse me," Dr. Rhodes interjected, offering a half-smile at Charles before turning to Tristan. "Congratulations on your announcement. I was hoping you and your father might want a private tour of our advanced surgical wing. I believe it would give you a better understanding of our top-tier capabilities." Charles glanced at Tristan. "What do you think, son?" Tristan paused, eyes flickering to Keisha before shifting back to Dr. Rhodes. "Sure. Let's do it." He then directed his gaze at Keisha. "I'll catch up with you later." "Okay." She nodded, feeling a pang of apprehension. Something about Dr. Rhodes's demeanor set her on edge. Nonetheless, she tried to remain calm. This was a day of celebration, a grand return of hope to Mount Sinai. Perhaps, she told herself, she was just being paranoid. But as Tristan and Charles followed Dr. Rhodes down the corridor, Keisha couldn't shake the sense that a storm was brewing. The triumph of the donation, the possibility of a budding romance, everything was too perfect. Fate had a cruel sense of timing, and she feared the threads of her fragile happiness might soon unravel. In the weeks that followed, Mount Sinai began to transform. Funds from the Hemsley Foundation flowed into revamped training programs, an expansion of the free clinic, and the hiring of additional nursing staff. Morale improved, patients felt better, cared for, and Keisha noticed fewer corners being cut. Even Dr. Rhodes found himself under closer scrutiny, his authority challenged by newly instituted oversight committees. But amid all these positive changes, Keisha's personal life felt like a whirlwind. Her grandmother's health remained fragile, and Keisha spent every spare minute by her bedside reading Bible passages or humming lullabies from her Jamaican heritage. She also grew closer to Tristan, exchanging late-night texts, sharing coffee breaks, and gradually opening up about her fears, dreams, and the burdens she carried. One cold, clear night on a rare evening off, Tristan invited Keisha to dinner. He insisted on picking her up, though she warned him about her run-down apartment building in Brooklyn. When his sleek black sedan pulled up, heads turned. Children gawped at the fancy car, and some neighbors peered curiously from their windows. Keisha felt self-conscious, but also strangely touched that he came to her neighborhood without hesitation. They drove to a cozy little restaurant in Lower Manhattan, its interior lined with rustic wooden tables and flickering candles. Over a simple meal of roast chicken and vegetables, they talked about everything from their families to their life philosophies. The conversation flowed effortlessly, laughter punctuating serious moments. After dinner, Tristan hesitated, then said, "I have something to show you. It's important." Keisha's brow furrowed with curiosity. "All right." They drove across town until they reached a tall building with floor-to-ceiling glass windows, an upscale high-rise that seemed worlds away from Keisha's reality. Tristan used a special keycard to access a private elevator, which whisked them to the top floor. When the doors opened, Keisha stepped into a luxurious penthouse, her breath catching at the panoramic view of the city lights. "Tristan, this place is incredible," she murmured, taking in the marble floors, the modern art, and the plush furniture. Yet something about the space felt empty, as though it lacked the warmth of a true home. "It's my father's," Tristan explained, following her gaze. "He uses it for business meetings, but he said I could stay here if I wanted." He paused, studying her reaction. "I'm telling you this because I don't want you to think I'm showing off. I just need you to understand my world." She turned to him, her heart pounding. "You've seen my world, my cramped apartment, my grandmother in the hospital, the city streets at their harshest. This is a far cry from that." Tristan nodded, stepping closer. "It is, and it's a world I don't feel entirely comfortable in anymore. Not after seeing how much suffering exists right outside these walls." He took her hands in his. "Keisha, I can't change who I am. I'm wealthy, but I also want to use that privilege for something good. Meeting you made me see there's more to life than just living comfortably." Her eyes glistened, tears threatening to spill. In a quiet voice, she replied, "I never asked you to change who you are." He inhaled deeply. "I know. That's what makes you so special. You accept people for who they are, homeless or rich. You see past the surface." Tristan swallowed, and then he reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Time seemed to slow. Keisha's heart thundered in her ears as Tristan opened the box, revealing a delicate ring, a single diamond set in a simple platinum band. "Keisha Jones," he said, voice trembling with emotion. "Will you marry me?" She stared at the ring, her mind reeling. Memories flashed her grandmother's cramped apartment. The tears of grateful patience. Tristan on the sidewalk curled in the cold, and the gentle look in his eyes each time he thanked her for her kindness. The ring sparkled, but what shone brighter was the sincerity in his gaze. "Yes," she breathed, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Yes, I will." Tristan slid the ring onto her finger and gathered her into his arms, holding her as though she was the most precious thing in the world. For a moment, all their struggles and fears receded, replaced by a promise of a better future. Yet life had a way of testing even the strongest vows. While the memory of this proposal would remain etched in their hearts as a beacon of hope, new challenges lay ahead. Karma had yet to deliver its final blow, and old resentments were poised to resurface, threatening everything they had fought for. Over the following months, the improvements at Mount Sinai continued to make headlines. Tristan and Keisha's engagement also became a talking point, though they kept it as private as possible. Unfortunately, de Rhodes's bitterness never subsided. Armed with a few disgruntled staff members who felt overshadowed by the new changes he attempted to undermine Keisha's credibility one last time, his plan backfired spectacularly when an internal audit commissioned by the Hemsley Foundation to ensure transparency exposed a string of suspicious billing practices tied to Dr. Rhodes. He had been overcharging patients, especially those with comprehensive insurance, to boost his department's revenue figures. The scandal rocked the hospital, and Dr. Rhodes found himself at the center of an internal investigation that quickly led to his resignation and the revocation of some of his medical privileges. The man who had tried so hard to sabotage Keisha ended up sabotaging himself. Karma indeed had come full circle. Meanwhile, Keisha's grandmother recovered enough to attend a small, intimate wedding ceremony held in the hospital's chapel, an unconventional venue, but one that symbolized the union of compassion, perseverance, and love that had brought Keisha and Tristan together. With Maricel as her maid of honor and Mrs. Albright giving her away, Keisha walked down the aisle, heart brimming with joy. Tristan stood waiting, tears in his eyes, and from that moment on, their life became a testament to the power of kindness, understanding, and unity across social divides. In the end, Keisha's journey is a reminder that true wealth isn't just measured in dollars. It's reflected in empathy, humility, and the courage to stand up for what's right. Tristan's life changed the moment he experienced compassion from someone who saw beyond his disheveled appearance. Through hardships, betrayal, and ultimate redemption, both discovered that real love can transcend social barriers and transform entire communities for the better. If this story moved you, we invite you to be a part of its continuing message. Click the like button if you believe in the power of kindness. Share this story to inspire others who might be facing their own trials. And subscribe to our channel for more tales that celebrate resilience, hope, and the enduring human spirit. Together, let's spread the message that compassion can spark miracles in our lives and in the lives of those around us.